Hello, everyone, and welcome to Quiz and Hers, the podcast where we test each other's knowledge and the strength of our relationship. I am Hallie, and today I will be your quiz mistress. I am here with my fiance, Justin.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry.
This is off to a good start. Continue.
Anyway, for those of you who have never listened before, the way this podcast works is that each week, one person asks the other person 6 questions from the categories of science, times and places, arts and literature, sports and games, everything else, and sorry, I just read that in the order of my question. Sounds and screens.
Yep. Okay.
I should say everything else last.
Yeah.
Because everything else is everything else that does not pertain to these other categories.
Right.
And all 6 of these questions are connected by a central theme.
Yep.
And currently the score is 11 for me and 6 for Justin.
Yes.
But keep in mind,
you're a game ahead.
I am a game ahead.
Yes.
So now you have a chance to try and catch up.
All right. Well, that's the plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you ready to hear this theme that I've hyped up?
Yes, you've been saying all week how good your theme is, so I'm very interested. What is it?
I'm excited.
Okay.
This week's theme is I Wanna Rock.
Rock.
Do you have any guess what that means?
Dun, 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 dun. Is it about rocks?
It is about rocks.
Okay.
I know it's very random, but I like it.
Okay.
All right. Ready for question 1?
Yep.
All right. So question 1 is science.
Okay.
And the question is, which rock type containing the name of a common chemical compound does not actually contain that chemical compound, but does contain large amounts of magnesium and iron?
Rock type. So it's not igneous, metamorphic, sedentary. Those are the 3.
Yeah, I don't mean category.
No,
I mean
I
what
know.
rock?
Yeah. Because those are the 3 classes of rock, but none of them have a compound in it.
You're close.
Silicates?
Is that your final answer?
Yeah.
No.
What?
It's basalt. Get it? Because salt is in the name.
Okay.
All right. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. So before I talk about basalt, I'm going to talk about rocks in general, since this is a rock-themed episode.
For some reason.
For some reason. I like it. Anyway, like you were saying before, there are 3 types of rocks. You almost got them correct. They are metamorphic, igneous, and sedimentary. You said sedentary.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I meant sedimentary.
AKA the couch potato. No.
All right.
Yeah,
I meant sedimentary.
Yeah. All right. So sedimentary rocks are formed from small fragments of materials like sand, shells, and pebbles.
Mm-hmm.
The sediment accumulates in layers and then hardens over time. They're usually the only type of rock that contains fossils. Fun fact.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And some examples of sedimentary rocks are conglomerate and limestone. Metamorphic rocks are formed under the Earth's surface from intense heat and pressure. They usually have ribbon-like layers throughout and sometimes have shiny crystals in them. Some examples are gneiss and marble.
Okay.
So picture marble.
Yeah.
Or like granite.
Right, like the layers of the... Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay.
And lastly, igneous rocks are formed when magma cools and hardens. Sometimes it hardens under the earth and sometimes it erupts from volcanoes as lava. Right. If the lava cools quickly, the rock looks shiny and glass-like. But if gas bubbles get trapped in it, it can look more holy.
Okay.
Like Swiss cheese.
Okay.
And examples of igneous rocks are obsidian and basalt, which is the one from the question.
Right.
The different rock types can actually be affected by weather, erosion, heat, and pressure to turn into one of the other rock types. So, for example, if metamorphic rock melts, it turns into magma, which can then cool and become an igneous rock. And if sedimentary rock under the Earth's surface is affected by heat and pressure, it can become metamorphic rock.
Right, that makes sense.
So those relationships are called the rock cycle.
Okay.
Anyway, a little bit more about basalt specifically. Like I said, basalt is an igneous rock formed from the rapid cooling of magnesium and iron-rich lava. More than 90% of all volcanic rock on Earth is basalt. It is usually gray or black, but can weather rapidly to brown or rust-colored because of the oxidation of its iron-rich minerals to iron oxides. After a volcanic eruption, the lava can spread quickly over large areas and then cool into basalt.
Mhm.
Basalt is one of the main components in the oceanic crust and mid-oceanic islands such as Hawaii and Iceland.
Huh.
So that's mostly what they're made of.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Never even really occurred to me to ask what they were made of. So
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
It's basalt.
Cool.
Yep. And also the darker areas that you can see on the surface of the moon are actually plains of flood basaltic lava flows.
Really?
Meaning like, old volcanoes erupted and it flooded and then that was
Really?
basalt. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yep.
Of Earth's moon.
Yes.
Really?
From like very old volcanic
Right, yeah. I mean,
eruptions.
obviously the moon is not geologically active anymore, so it must have been from a long time ago. Huh.
Yeah,
I didn't
and
know.
Mars also has it on the surface. Yeah. In terms of usage, basalt is often used in construction and in making statues. Heating and extruding basalt can turn it into something called stone wool, which is apparently a very good thermal insulator. Lastly, research has been done recently on the ability of basalt to sequester carbon, which may help remove industrial carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So hopefully this line of research will be able to help with slowing down global warming.
Cool.
Yep, that's basalt.
All right.
Ready for question 2?
Yep.
It's times and places.
Okay.
What monolithic limestone promontory attracts a large number of tourists for its Barbary macaques and its network of tunnels? Oh god, I thought you would find this easy. Now I feel bad. I could have made it
is it the Rock of Gibraltar?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I feel better now.
I was thinking
I feel bad.
like what big rocks are on the Barbary coast, and the Rock of Gibraltar isn't, but it's right across the strait, so
Yeah, it's right there.
close enough.
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
As you can guess, they came over there.
Yeah.
So, the Rock of Gibraltar is located in the British Overseas Territory of Gibraltar, which is on the Iberian Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know, that means like Spain.
Yeah. In Portugal.
Yeah, but I think it's attached to Spain.
It is, yeah.
And it is fully surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea. Well, not fully, it's a peninsula. It is surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea on 3 sides. The rock juts out into the Strait of Gibraltar from the southern coast of Spain, like I said. It is monolithic, meaning that it is a single massive rock, and it is a promontory, meaning that it projects into a lowland or a body of water. Gibraltar has been besieged 15 times and takes its name from the invading Arab leader who captured Spain in the 8th century. Originally, the Romans built shrines to Hercules there, and they regarded the rock as one of the twin pillars of Hercules, along with Abila Mons in North Africa. This was like a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Then, Gibraltar came under Muslim Moorish rule in 711 AD. Control went back and forth between the Moors and the Christian crown of Castile until it finally came under Spanish rule until 1704, at which point Britain finally took the rock in the War of Spanish Succession.
Mm-hmm.
After trying multiple times to recover the territory, Spain finally ceded Gibraltar to Britain in 1713 under the Treaty of Utrecht. So, now Britain still has it.
Right, yeah.
The upper part of the rock is a nature reserve that is home to around 300 Barbary macaques, like I said in the question.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Barbary macaques are a species of the monkey genus macaques, and they are the only population of wild monkeys in Europe.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, like you wouldn't think of it, but
Right, yeah.
makes sense. The population on the Rock of Gibraltar is actually increasing in size, while the population in North Africa is declining of this species.
Yeah.
And on Gibraltar, the macaques will actually come up to people and even climb on them sometimes. And because they're so used to being around people, they actually learned how to open pockets and unzip handbags to steal food from people.
That's amazing.
So I was reading, and apparently there are like huge fines if you try to feed them because they've like really learned how to get stuff from you.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, also, like I was saying in the question, the rock has a labyrinthine network of tunnels.
So I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did not know that either.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the tunnels were built over the course of 200 years by the British Army.
To what end?
I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
Even though the land area of the rock is only 2.6 square miles, there are roughly 34 miles of tunnels.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're obviously very, convoluted. Is that the right word?
Densely packed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The original tunnels were used to travel between artillery positions and housed guns in embrasures cut into the rock. Yeah. More were built in the 1800s to have easier access to different parts of Gibraltar and to deliver the water supply throughout Gibraltar. In 1939, when World War II broke out, authorities evacuated the civilian population of Gibraltar to Morocco, and by 1942, there were 30,000 British soldiers, sailors, and airmen on the rock. And this is when most of the tunnels were built.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah. The British had a secret plan called Operation Tracer that was to hide men in the tunnels in case the Germans captured the rock. 6 men waited undercover at Gibraltar for 2.5 years, but the Germans never came close to capturing the rock. But I mean, at least they were ready.
So they were just paid to sit there with their thumbs up their asses underground in case the Germans ever showed up?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I'm pretty sure Hitler, said that he really wanted to capture it.
Well, yeah, it's a strategically important part of the Mediterranean, of course.
Right. So, they thought it was coming, but
Right.
It didn't come, I guess. It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
The British Army finally stopped the tunneling in 1968, which is kind of late if you think about it.
Yeah, wow.
And since then, they have been progressively turning the tunnels over to the government of Gibraltar. So they don't really need them anymore.
Right.
Obviously.
And Gibraltar is self-governing as an overseas territory?
Yes.
Okay.
In addition to the man-made tunnels, the rock also has over 100 caves. The caves have been formed naturally because the limestone composition of the rock dissolves slowly in rainwater, and that's how the caves form. The most commonly visited cave is called St. Michael's Cave, which is halfway up the western slope of the rock. And lastly, the Moorish Castle is a medieval fortification on the Rock of Gibraltar. It has various buildings, gates, and fortified walls. And it was built by the Marinid dynasty, a Sunni Muslim dynasty that ruled Morocco from the 13th to the 15th century. The main tower of the castle is called the Tower of Homage. And part of the castle actually housed the prison of Gibraltar until 2010, which is pretty cool. I think now it's all just a tourist site.
Right, yeah, historical site, yeah.
Yeah. One more thing about Gibraltar.
Okay.
Fossils of Neanderthals have been found there, and excavations in one of the caves on the eastern side of the rock showed that it was used by Neanderthals at some point. So they actually found it in the 1800s and didn't realize the significance of that. So that's pretty interesting.
Cool.
That's it.
Okay.
You're 1 for 2. 2
that
for
is
1.
correct.
No, you're 1 for 2.
1 for 2.
That doesn't even make sense. Okay. Ready for question 3?
Yep.
Arts and literature. What novel with a type of rock in the name was published by T.H. White in 1938 and is likely based on written works going back as far as the Historia Brittonum, written around 828 AD?
The Sword in the Stone.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. As you can imagine, the basis for this has a pretty long history.
Yeah.
Let me start by talking a little bit about King Arthur. So, King Arthur is a British leader of legend who, according to medieval histories, led the defense of Britain against Saxon invaders in the late 5th and early 6th centuries. There is no one canonical version of Arthurian legend. The main sources from...
As often happens with legends.
Correct. Yeah, okay, fine. The main sources from which this information is based are called Annales Cambriae, Historia Brittonum, and the writings of Gildas. Arthur first gained popularity after Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote Historia Regum Britanniae in the 12th century. Some of the other elements shared by all of the stories are Arthur's father, called Uther Pendragon, his wife Guinevere, the wizard Merlin, and the sword Excalibur. There was no mention of Lancelot or the Holy Grail until de Troyes wrote the stories in the 12th century, which are collectively known as the Prose Lancelot or the Vulgate cycle. I don't know, I feel like Vulgate cycle is an important thing to know.
Yeah, I didn't know that that's what it was called. When I hear Vulgate, I think of the Latin Vulgate Bible, but I didn't realize that it was also used to refer to an Arthurian story cycle. Interesting.
Yep. And his stories began the genre of Arthurian romance and turned the focus to the other knights of the Round Table, not just Arthur.
So who was the author of that?
His last name is de Troyes.
De Troyes, right. Okay, yeah, I've heard of him. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. His first name was complicated, and I left it out.
Okay, yeah.
There were a couple other names.
You only need the last name for trivia, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
The last of the medieval works about King Arthur was Thomas Malory's retelling of the entire legend, which is called La Morte d'Arthur, and was written in the late 15th century. After the Middle Ages, the interest in King Arthur began to decline, but most works since then have been based on Malory's. The interest in King Arthur and medieval romances actually had a revival in the early 19th century, and Le Morte d'Arthur was reprinted for the first time in almost 200 years. Poets such as William Wordsworth and Alfred Tennyson wrote Arthurian poems around this time. The interest continued through the 19th century and into the 20th, and inspired such books as Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which he wrote in 1889.
Right, yeah.
And that was sort of a satire
Yeah.
of Arthurian legend. So, back to The Sword in the Stone. T.H. White published it in 1938 as part of the tetralogy The Once and Future King. The tetralogy is about the boyhood of King Arthur, which was never written about by Malory. It combines elements of history, legend, comedy, and fantasy. In the story, Arthur was being tutored by Merlin to prepare him for royal life. At one point, Arthur actually meets Robin Hood, he's called Robin Wood in the novel. I guess there were copyright issues. I'm not really sure.
There shouldn't have been.
But I didn't know that, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in order to get away with historical inaccuracies, White wrote that Merlin lives backwards in time.
I remember this. I read this in middle school,
Oh,
I
really?
think. Yeah, I remember that he was born on the wrong end of time or something.
Yeah, so basically he uses this as a way to include anachronisms in the story. It is debated whether or not Excalibur and the Sword in the Stone are the same, but they are usually considered separate.
Right, because Excalibur is given to Arthur by the Lady in the Lake.
Right.
Right, yeah. We know that from Monty Python.
I'm getting to Monty. Anyway.
Strange women in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government.
Anyway.
And that was Justin Quotes Monty Python.
Yes.
Go on.
Stay tuned for more.
Undoubtedly.
So, the first tale to mention the Sword in the Stone idea was Robert de Boron's Merlin, which was written around the late 12th century. The story goes that Arthur obtained the British throne by pulling a sword from an anvil sitting on top of a stone that appeared in a churchyard on Christmas Eve. The point was that only the, quote, true king would be able to pull the sword from the stone. Mm-hmm. In the Arthurian legends of Galahad, he also pulls a sword from a stone, which means that he is the one destined to find the Holy Grail. So it kind of happens twice.
Interesting.
Yeah. And since The Once and Future King was published, there have been many more adaptations of Arthurian legend. The big ones are the Disney animated film The Sword in the Stone, the Lerner and Loewe stage musical Camelot, and, of course, Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Which is the definitive retelling of Arthurian legend as far as I'm concerned.
Of course. Okay. Ready for question 4?
Yep.
All right. It's sports and games.
Okay.
What sport, an Olympic sport since 1998, is named for the movement of the stone-like objects used during gameplay?
Curling.
Yes.
Yes.
We love curling.
I love watching curling. It is fascinating.
I'm pretty sure this past Olympics was the first time I've ever watched curling, and I really liked it.
It's mesmerizing, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it.
It should be so boring, but it's so fascinating.
It's fun.
Yeah, I love curling.
Yeah, and it's just, amazing to think that some people are that good at,
something that weird and specialized.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, anyway, a bit about curling.
Yes. If we have any curlers in our listeners, among our listeners, let us know.
That would be impressive.
Yeah.
All right. So, the sport of curling began in Scotland in the 1500s. There are also 2 paintings by Peter Bruegel the Elder from 1565 depicting curling matches between Flemish peasants.
Huh.
Yep. At first, the curling stones did not have handles and sometimes had finger holes like a bowling ball. They either played on frozen rivers or on man-made frozen ponds created just for curling. But it was always played outside.
Yep.
Yep. In Scotland and areas settled by Scots, such as southern New Zealand, curling is known as, quote, the roaring game because of the sound the stones make when sliding over the pebbles of ice. What?
I just think that's funny.
Okay.
If I heard the phrase "the roaring game," I would not have guessed that meant curling.
Right.
I would have thought
it's
soccer
so
or something. Yeah.
The Royal Caledonian Curling Club is recognized by the International Olympic Committee as creating the official rules for curling. The international governing body for curling, called the World Curling Federation, is in Perth, Scotland, and the oldest sports club is the Royal Montreal Curling Club. Canada is now the most common location for curling.
The oldest? You mean the sport's oldest club?
Yeah.
Not the oldest sports club.
Oh, did I say that?
I think you did.
I meant the oldest sports club of curling.
Right, okay. The oldest, yes, okay.
You know what I meant.
Yes, I did, but I'm being pedantic and obnoxious.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
That's what you're here for, I guess. And Canada is now the most common location for curling after Scottish immigrants moved there.
Huh.
Yeah, which, I mean, if you watch the Olympics, well, I'll get there.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, the area of ice where curling is played is called a curling sheet. The target is called the house and contains a center circle called a button and 3 concentric rings that have 4, 8, and 12 feet diameters. In most curling matches, someone called the ice maker is in charge of monitoring and adjusting the ice. The ice maker is also in charge of creating the pebble, and that's where they put little droplets on the ice to get a rougher surface for it.
Right. Because otherwise the stones would basically just slide forever, right? You need some kind of friction.
Right, exactly. Right. And the amount of curl of the stone can depend on how much pebble is left on the ice. So as the game goes on, the pebble starts to flatten out.
Interesting.
Yep. The stone, also known as a rock in North America, is made of granite, which comes from Ailsa Craig on an island off the coast of Scotland, or Treffer Granite Quarry in Wales. Those are the 2 places that curling stones come from.
Huh.
That is it.
Why?
Because that's where the curling stone makers are.
Oh, okay. Sure.
I was reading about these people that own this, and they've been doing this forever, and that's what they do is they make curling stones.
Right. So it's not anything about the particular granite. It's not like that's the only granite in the world that would work. It's just that that's what the people who do it are.
I don't think it's the only granite in the world that would work, but I was reading something about how the granite is ideal for curling, but I'm not exactly sure how, but it is
right, but I mean
good for it. But
presumably that's because the game evolved around curling stones made from that place, right? So yeah, okay.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yep. And did you know this? Only the bottom quarter to half an inch of the stone is in contact with the ice.
Wait, what?
Only the bottom quarter to half an inch of the stone is in contact with the ice. So it's a very, very tiny surface that's actually in contact with ice.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Sure.
Yeah. And a handle is attached by a hole running through the middle of the stone. There are now electronic handles, which can help make sure that the thrower isn't still holding it as it passes the hog line, which is against the rules. So I don't know if you've ever watched it. I'm talking to the listeners. I know you've watched it.
Yes.
Basically, they slide, and then they let go of the stone, and they can't slide past this hog line.
Yeah.
So the electronic ones can tell.
Cool.
Which is cool. The curling broom or brush is used to sweep the ice surface in the path of the stone. Curlers also wear special shoes called sliders and grippers. Sliders usually have soles made of Teflon, and grippers usually have a rubbery sole. So it's depending on the purpose. As you can imagine, the person throwing the stone wants to slide more, and the person sweeping does not want to slide very much. So the goal of curling is to score points by getting the stones closer to the center of the house, aka the button, than the other team's stones. The players take turns shooting the stones from the other side of the sheet. Each team has 8 rocks to slide. The team that wins that round, or end as they call it, gets 1 point for each of its stones that is closer to the button than their opponent's closest stone.
Right.
I find this very hard to calculate when I watch. I don't know.
It's just however many are more central than the most central stone from the other team. That's
right. No, I know.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
But when I watch, I'm just what? How do they add this up? But anyway, I guess it's not that complicated.
No, I don't think so.
It's hard when you only watch the sport once every 4 years.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So the first World Championship of curling was in 1959 and was called the Scotch Cup. The first title was won by the Canadian team from Saskatchewan. Like I said in the question, it started at the Olympics in 1998, which was, do you know where it is?
Nagano.
Yes, just a little extra question in there. No points for it.
I know.
So today the Olympics has men's, women's, and mixed doubles tournaments. The mixed tournament was actually held for the first time in 2018. And like I said, we watched a fair amount of those matches, and I didn't even realize that was new.
No, I didn't realize that either. Interesting. That's the one we watched the most of, I think, was the mixed doubles. It's just the way it worked out is that happened to be on when we were watching the Olympics,
Yep. And Canada's men's teams won the gold in 2006, 2010, and 2014, and won silver in 98 and 2002. Their mixed doubles team was the gold medal winning team in this last Olympics that we watched.
I remember that.
They were good. It was fun. My favorite, this is just an aside, my favorite thing about curling is that they just do not look like athletes. They just look like your uncle.
They just look like
just
people. Yeah.
A dude. I find that fun.
Yeah.
Makes me
no
think,
offense to any of our listeners who are curlers.
No, but it just makes me think maybe I could do it. I'm sure it's like a very practiced skill and stuff.
Of course, like
but
anything.
It is nice to think that, like, there's something. I can play tennis, but I can't do anything else. Athletic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 2 questions left.
Okay.
Question 5 is everything else.
Okay.
Which granite sculpture created by Gutzon Borglum was pronounced complete after 15 years of sculpting, even though he had planned to sculpt it more?
It's Mount Rushmore.
Yes.
How is that everything else and not arts and literature?
I told you. It was just because I wanted to talk about it and I had a lot of things to say, and it can just be considered everything else because it's not like he was sitting there sculpting it with his hands, and like that's not like, it's not like in a museum, and like I guess it is art, but it's also like a monument.
Tourism, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Call it that.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go. You convinced yourself. All right, moving on. So the original purpose for creating Mount Rushmore was to boost tourism in the Black Hills region of South Dakota. The mountain was originally known by the Lakota Sioux as the Six Grandfathers, or Cougar Mountain. In the Great Sioux War of 1876, the U.S. military took control of the area from the Lakota Sioux, and that is still disputed.
Mm-hmm.
The peak was previously called Cougar Mountain, Sugarloaf Mountain, Slaughterhouse Mountain, and Keystone Cliffs, but was renamed Mount Rushmore after Charles Rushmore traveled there on a prospecting expedition. He was just like a rich guy that went there looking for gold.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hey, does this mountain have a name? And his friend was like, oh, let's just call it Mount Rushmore.
Okay.
And he's like, okay. I don't know. Anyway, the idea for Mount Rushmore was conceived by Doane Robinson in 1923, and in 1924 he convinced the sculptor Gutzon Borglum to see if the idea would be feasible. Prior to this, Borglum had sculpted the Confederate Memorial Carving, a memorial to Confederate leaders in Georgia, which is the largest bas-relief sculpture in the world.
Yeah.
And just as an aside, the Georgia State Representative Stacey Abrams called for the sandblasting of the carving in August 2017 after the white nationalist protests in Charlottesville, Virginia. So it sounds like they're still trying to figure out what to do with it, because it's not just like a statue like all the other Confederate statues that they took down. So they're trying to figure it out.
Okay.
But yeah. Borglum chose Mount Rushmore for the sculpture because it faced southeast and had the greatest sun exposure. In 1925, Congress authorized the Mount Rushmore National Memorial Commission. It took 400 workers 15 years from 1927 to 1941 to complete the sculpture. And also, fun fact, not a single worker died.
That's surprising.
Isn't it?
Yes.
I know I've read about like building the Hoover Dam and stuff, and like a lot of people died.
Yeah.
So like this is very impressive because it was huge and it was difficult. Borglum's son, Lincoln Borglum, helped oversee the execution, and the chief carver on the project was Luigi Del Bianco, who emigrated to New York from Italy. He worked at carving the details of the faces, whereas the larger sculpting was done with dynamite.
Right, I knew that.
And still no one got killed.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Even though they were using dynamite.
Yeah.
Yep. And for any of our international listeners who may not know, the sculpture consists of the faces of U.S. Presidents George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. And Borglum chose these presidents specifically because of their roles in expanding the territory of the United States.
Right.
He originally planned to include the figures from head to waist, but there was not enough funding for that, so they just didn't.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh,
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't.
You've never seen like the I don't know if it was a sketch or like a model where they showed like George Washington's like revolutionary uniform?
Yeah, no, I have seen that. So, well, Washington, his torso is partly sculpted into the mountain.
I think
but the rest of them are just heads.
Yeah.
But I thought that was always the plan because he was like kind of standing in the front almost, so you would see that. But
no, they were going to do all of them all the way to the waist,
really?
But they just couldn't afford. The U.S. government was not going to pay for that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and also in 1937, a bill was introduced to Congress to add Susan B. Anthony, who you may remember from my last episode.
Mm-hmm.
But Congress agreed that federal funds should only be used to finish the heads that had been started. So maybe someday.
Doubt it.
She can get a spot. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it would.
But I think if they weren't going to spend the money then, they're not going to spend the money now.
No, probably not.
Yeah. In 1998, a vault was installed behind the carved faces cut 70 feet into the rock and containing 16 porcelain enamel panels, which include the text of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, biographies of the 4 presidents and Borglum, and a history of the U.S., which was written by a college student who won a competition for it back in 1934.
Huh.
So like in 1934, they had this competition to write a biography of a history of the United States to be put at Mount Rushmore. And then this college kid won. And then he definitely did not live to see the day at which it was put there. He was probably just like, when is this going to happen? And they did it in 1998.
Huh.
Yeah.
He could have still been alive.
He could have been.
Potentially.
I hope so. Also in 1998, they opened a visitor center, the Lincoln Borglum Museum, and the Presidential Trail. Just, continuing to boost the tourism.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, the Sioux population in the area still believe that they have ownership of the Black Hills because of the Treaty of Fort Laramie from 1868. So in that treaty, they were like given the ownership of it, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
In 1971, I'm like saying 1900s is 1800s and 1700s is 1900s. Anyway. In 1971, Native Americans occupied the monument and named it Mount Crazy Horse. Currently, the Crazy Horse Memorial is being built on another mountain in the Black Hills and will be larger than Mount Rushmore, but the construction of this is also controversial even within the Native American community.
Yeah, and no progress has been made on it in decades, right?
Right. But it's happening supposedly.
Right, yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Ready for the last question?
I'm ready.
Sounds and screens. In which TV show, adapted from a series of novels by Diana Gabaldon, does the main character visit a rock formation called Craik na Dun on several occasions?
Is it the thing you like? Outlander?
Is that your final answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Outlander.
Okay.
Okay, so.
We're tied.
You did get 5.
Yes, I did.
Damn, I didn't think you would get 5. Going too easy on you, clearly. Ugh, I need a win. Alright. Outlander is about Claire Randall, a married World War II nurse in 1945 who is transported back in time to Scotland in 1743 via an ancient standing stone formation called Craik na Dun. You would not believe how that is spelled. Just say.
It spelled?
It's spelled Craigh, space N-A, space D-U-N.
Huh.
So this whole time, I was thinking it was pronounced differently.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And while there, she meets a Highland warrior named James Fraser and becomes involved in the Jacobite Risings. It can be considered historical fiction since a lot of the history about the Jacobite Risings is based on history and certain historical figures are characters in the books, including Charles Stuart and King Louis XV of France. Like I said, the TV show, which premiered in 2014, is based on the Outlander book series written by Diana Gabaldon. There are currently 8 books which are published between 1991 and 2014, and a 9th is being written now. I personally have read the first 2 books, and I'm going to start the 3rd one soon. I have not watched the show yet.
After you finish Neuromancer?
Yes, after I finish Neuromancer. That's the plan. Anyway, in addition to the books, Gabaldon also wrote 4 novellas and short stories that are side stories to the novels. The TV show, which I have yet to watch, was produced by Sony Pictures TV and Left Bank Pictures for Starz. If I could say these names, that would be great. Catriona Balfe plays Claire Randall, and Sam Heughan plays Jamie Fraser. Each season of the show encompasses one of the novels. The 4th and most recent season premiered on November 4th, 2018, and the show has already been renewed for 5th and 6th seasons. In both the novels and the TV show, the characters frequently speak in Scottish Gaelic. The TV show has a language consultant to help with this. And I watched a YouTube video where Sam Heughan, who plays Jamie, teaches you how to pronounce some of the words, like Craik na Dun. Because I was like, how do you pronounce Craik na Dun?
Right.
And then I found out that the TV show does a YouTube series where they tell you how to pronounce things.
Yeah, cool.
Which is fun. I think while reading the book, I was definitely pronouncing those words very wrong in my head.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting.
Huh.
So this is my favorite. There is a character whose name is spelled Laogaire. Laoghhaire.
Okay.
Like, how would you pronounce that?
I don't know.
I thought it was Laogaire.
Okay.
So I'm watching this video, and apparently it's pronounced Leary.
What?
Just Leary.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, what the fuck? And on the YouTube video, they were asking fans to try and pronounce it, and someone said leg whore, which is even better.
Oh, God.
That's my favorite.
Foghorn leg whore?
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, since there's not much more I can say about the TV show or the books, let me give a quick overview of what the Jacobite Risings were, since that seems more educational. The Jacobite Risings are also known as the Jacobite Rebellions or the War of the British Succession. They occurred between 1688 and 1746 and the rebels' aim was to return James II of England and 7th of Scotland and the House of Stuart to the throne of Great Britain. They had previously been deposed by Parliament during what is called the Glorious Revolution in 1688.
Yep. The Stuarts were still on the throne. It was just not James's line. It was Mary II and her husband William of Orange. Right. So Mary II was the Stuart monarch.
I'm the one teaching here.
Okay.
I didn't say that, but yes, you're right.
Yeah.
There were several risings, but the one referenced in Outlander is the Jacobite Rising of 1745, in which Charles Edward Stuart tried to regain the throne for his father. It happened during the War of the Austrian Succession, during which most of the British army was in Europe. So they were trying to, do it while they were away.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Charles's army captured Edinburgh and won the Battle of Prestonpans. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, too. Who knows? It's spelled Prestonpans.
Okay.
The army decided to invade England and reach Derby, where they decided to turn back. The battle which ended the rebellion was called the Battle of Culloden. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right either. And that battle plays a huge role in the Outlander book I just read, the second book. During this battle, the Jacobite forces were decisively defeated by forces from Hanover, commanded by William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, and it was near Inverness in the Scottish Highlands.
Okay.
And that's it.
Cool.
You did well.
Yes, this was a good game for me.
That's because I was mostly writing these questions based on what I wanted to talk about and not based on you getting them correct.
Okay.
But then I have to risk losing. So, I don't know if it's worth it. No, it is. It is worth it. It's okay. I can come back. I'll come back next time.
Yeah. No, there's still, 4 episodes this season, so it's anybody's game now.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. That's it for today.
All right. Bring us home.
All right. If you would like to follow us on social media, we are at Quiz on Hers on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
Say that again.
Gmail.
You said we're at Quiz on Hers.
I did not say Quiz on Hers.
You did.
I would not say Quiz on Hers.
You want to go to the tape?
I've been pronouncing a lot of words today, so I cannot be blamed, but I did not mean to say Quiz on Hers. I probably just said it quickly.
Yeah, we're Quiz and Hers.
It totally sounded like you just said Quiz on Hers.
Quiz and Hers.
If you say it quickly, it sounds like Quiz and Hers.
I guess you're right. Quiz and Hers.
Yeah.
On Facebook, Twitter,
they know what
Instagram,
it's called.
Gmail.
Yep. You can feel free to leave us a review on iTunes.
Yep.
Feel free to contact us. Give us any feedback you have.
Yep.
And we'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Bye. What monolithic limestone promontory attracts a large number of tourists for its barberry... Oh crap, I didn't look up how to say this word. It's Macaques.
What?
Macaques? Those monkeys?
Macaques.
Okay. Question 2. Times and places.